This quote is from Karen Harris, a master animator that worked with Chuck Jones in the golden age of animation at the Warner Brothers studio. A walk is the first thing to learn. Learn walks of all kinds, because walks are about the toughest thing to do right. The quote is from the Animator Survival Kit by Richard Williams. Another fantastic resource. I can't recommend this book enough, particularly the chapter on walks. His book is a fantastic resource. Here's the walk that I'm going to use to break down the formula into its constituent parts. It's a pretty exaggerated walk, very cartoony. Something that moves this exaggerated allows us to really experiment and see the changes in each pose so that we can really understand the movement and figure out how to apply it to more subtle movements later. When we break down the walk into its major keys, we can see that we start with a contact pose. This is the pose where the heel of the leading foot is just touching the ground, but it hasn't transferred the weight to that foot yet. The next pose, the down, is where all the weight gets absorbed by the leading leg. The passing position is where all the weight gets transferred onto one leg. In the push-off pose, it's the point of no return. Now we've completely gone off balance, and we need that leading foot to get out to the ground to catch the weight when we get to the next contact pose. A walk is basically a controlled fall. We're continually transferring the weight from two legs to one leg to two legs. So it's really important that we get a strong sense of balance and weight in our poses. When we look at the walk in terms of the number of poses that we essentially have two poses where both feet are on the ground and two poses where one foot's on the ground. In terms of workflow, this is how I like to build a walk cycle. I'll start by creating a contact pose. Then I'll copy that pose over to frame 13, 12 frames later. Then I'll mirror the pose for the other side of the body. So essentially what's happening is we're swapping the arms and the legs, and we're also making sure that the body rotations are flipped as well. Then we need to make sure that we copy frame 1 all the way over to frame 25. This is a technical part of making a cycle. When we're making a cycle in 3D, we need to make sure that the first frame and the last frame are the same, so that way when we're working from frame 13 to the very beginning, we have a target that we can use in our animation. Once we have the contact positions, now we can add the passing positions. The passing position is halfway between the first two contacts at frame 7. The mirror image pose is going to be 12 frames later over at frame 19. Once we have the passing positions, we can block in the down position. This will be 3 frames after the first pose at frame 1. That'll give us frame 4. And then 12 frames later at frame 16, we'll have the next pose. The last key to add is the push-off. And the push-off pose, we'll create at frame 10, and then we'll create the mirror image at frame 22. Now in terms of strategy, how we block in the walk in terms of the entire body, what I recommend is we'll start simple with the hips and the legs. We can figure out the stride length and the texture of the up and down of the hips. Once we have that working, then we can branch up to the upper spine, and we can figure out the spine's posture and then block in drag, overlap, and follow through on the spine. The last element we can add are the extremities, working our way to the arms. We'll figure out how much arm swing we need, and again, look at the texture of how the arms are swinging back and forth. Here we have the walk with just the hips and the legs. Next, we'll add the overlapping action of the spine. Continue adding drag, overlap, and follow through up to the head and neck area. And then the last element to add are the arms, swinging back and forth. From the front view, we need to make sure that our hips are rocking side to side, that they're moving over the supporting leg when we're in the passing position. So when all the weight's on one side, the hips need to be over the foot that's on the ground. We also need to make sure that the hips are twisting. They turn away from the leading foot. Whatever the hips are doing, the chest is usually opposing that movement. So here's the contact pose from the front view. It's important to make sure that you move the feet under the body, under the center of mass essentially, so you make sure you support the weight. The hips will turn away from the leading foot. That's usually the rotate Y. In the passing position, this is where we have to transition all of our balance and weight onto one leg. So the hip is going to slide over that supporting leg, and that means that we're going to have a little bit of a translate on the hips. Again, that's usually X. And the side of the body that's not supported is going to tilt down. So the hips on that side are going to be lower than the leg that is supporting all the weight. And that's usually a rotate Z. So you can see there's quite a lot of things to block in our walk, and we need to make sure that we're continually looking at multiple angles, front and side views particularly, to make sure we're hitting all these key moments to make sure that our pose has the right sense of weight and balance.